The Grand Aurora Hotel was filled with light, quiet music, and expensive voices.
I agree.
Important people moved through the halls in perfect suits, speaking in low tones about money, power, and opportunity. On the top floor, inside a private meeting room, a deal worth billions of dollars was about to be signed. Daniel Hayes, one of the youngest billionaires in the country, sat at the head of a long glass table. Calm, confident, used to winning. Cameras waited outside. Lawyers reviewed papers one last time. Investors smiled, already thinking about the profits. Everything looked perfect. Daniel picked up the pen. Across the room, Maya stood silently near the wall, holding a silver tray. She was just a waitress, working the late shift like every other night. Most people in the room had not even noticed her. To them, she was invisible, someone who served drinks and disappeared. But Maya's hand was shaking. A few minutes earlier, she had overheard something she was never supposed to hear. Words spoken in whispers. Angry voices. A warning about the deal. About what would happen after the signature. She tried to ignore it. This was not her world. Rich people problems were not hers to fix. She needed this job. Her son needed food. Ren was already late. Still, the words kept repeating in her mind. He doesn't know what he's signing. Daniel lowered the pen toward the paper. Maya's heart started racing. If she stayed quiet, everything would continue normally. No trouble, no risk, but something inside her refused to stay silent. Before she could stop herself, she stepped forward. "Sir." Her voice came out softer than she expected. No one reacted at first. Then she said it again, louder this time. "Sir, don't sign that." The room froze. Every head turned toward her. Confused faces. Annoyed expressions. One of the lawyers frowned immediately. "What is this?" he said sharply. "Security?" Maya realized too late what she had done. Her face burned as dozens of eyes stared at her. She looked small in the large room, surrounded by powerful people who clearly believed she did not belong there. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, her voice shaking. You shouldn't sign it." A few people laughed quietly. One investor rolled his eyes. Daniel, however, did not laugh. He studied her carefully. She did not look like someone trying to cause attention. She looked scared. Not for herself, but for him. "Why?" Daniel asked calmly. The lawyer leaned closer to him. "Mr. Hayes, this is inappropriate." She doesn't know what she's talking about. But Daniel did not look away from Maya. She hesitated. Saying more could cost her everything. Her job, her reputation, maybe worse. Yet she remembered the conversation she had overheard. The way the men had spoken. The confidence in their voices. As if the outcome was already decided. "As soon as you sign," Maya said slowly, choosing each word carefully, "you will lose more than money." The laughter stopped. Now the room felt different. Heavy. Uncomfortable. One of the investors stood up. "This is ridiculous. Remove her." Security moved toward her, but Daniel raised his hand slightly. They stopped. Maya swallowed hard. She knew she had crossed a line that could not be undone. Daniel leaned back in his chair. For the first time that evening, uncertainty crossed his face. "How would you know that?" he asked. Maya's eyes moved around the room. Some people avoided her gaze. Others looked angry. One man near the window suddenly looked nervous. That was when Daniel noticed it too. Maya took a slow breath. "I heard something," she said quietly. "Something you were not meant to hear." Silence filled the room again. The pen was still in Daniel's hand, hovering above the paper. The deal that was supposed to take seconds now felt dangerous. Outside, cameras waited for the announcement. Inside, everything had changed. Daniel slowly placed the pen down. And for the first time that night, the most powerful man in the room realized the only honest person there might be the waitress everyone had ignored. The silence in the room did not last long. As soon as Daniel placed the pen down, the calm atmosphere broke. Lawyers began whispering to each other. Investors looked annoyed. One of them checked his watch loudly, as if this delay was a personal insult. Maya stood frozen near the table. Now that everyone was staring at her, fear slowly replaced her courage. She knew she should leave. She knew she had already said too much. But Daniel's voice stopped her. "What exactly did you hear?" The question was simple, but the tension behind it filled the room. Maya noticed how some of the men suddenly avoided eye contact. Others leaned back in their chairs, pretending to look relaxed. The head lawyer spoke quickly. "Mr. Hayes, this is unnecessary." She overheard something and misunderstood. "These agreements are complex. She is not qualified to." Daniel raised his hand again. "Let her speak." Maya swallowed. Her throat felt dry. She had replayed that moment in her mind again and again since hearing it. Just 2 hours earlier, she had been serving drinks in a smaller private lounge. Two men from this same meeting were inside, arguing in low voices. They thought no one was listening. She had not meant to hear them, but she did. They said, Maya started slowly, trying to remember the exact words. They said once the contract is signed, the land ownership changes immediately. And after that, the workers can be removed without compensation. A few people in the room shifted uncomfortably. "That's normal business restructuring," one investor said quickly. "Nothing illegal." Maya shook her head. "No, that's not what they said." Her voice became stronger now, as if the memory itself gave her courage. "They said the numbers were changed, that the losses were hidden, and that by the time you found out, it would be too late to stop it." The room went quiet again. Daniel's expression changed slightly. Not fear, but focus. "Who said this?" he asked. Maya hesitated. Saying names felt dangerous. She could already feel the anger building around her. I don't know their names," she said. "But one of them is here." That sentence hit the room like a sudden storm. Several men immediately protested. "This is absurd. She's guessing. This is why staff shouldn't be allowed in private meetings." But Daniel noticed something important. One man near the end of the table had gone very still. His smile had disappeared. Daniel's senior partner, Victor Lang. Victor forced a small laugh. "Daniel, come on. You're not going to stop a billion-dollar deal because of a waitress's imagination." Maya's eyes moved toward him without thinking. That was enough. Daniel noticed. A small detail. A quick glance. But it said more than words. The tension in the room grew heavier. Daniel leaned forward slightly. "Continue." Maya nodded nervously. "They also said you trust people too easily, that you wouldn't read the last section carefully." One of the lawyers suddenly interrupted, his voice sharp. "This is going too far." But Daniel was already reaching for the contract again, not to sign, but to flip through the pages. His eyes moved quickly across the final section. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Then he stopped. A small clause, hidden between legal language. Easy to miss. Ownership transfer conditions that activated under financial review. A review controlled by Victor's division. Daniel's jaw tightened. It was not illegal on the surface, but it could be used to take control away from him. Slowly, Daniel looked up. Victor's confident expression was gone now. The room felt colder. Maya realized she had stepped into something much bigger than she understood. This was not just a bad deal. This was betrayal. One investor stood up angrily. "This meeting is out of control. Either we sign now, or we walk away." Daniel didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at Maya again, really looked this time. She wasn't trying to win anything. She looked like someone who wished she had never spoken at all, which made her more believable. Finally, Daniel closed the contract. "We're not signing tonight," he said calmly. The reaction was immediate. Angry voices filled the room. Chairs moved. Deals were threatened. But Daniel stayed calm, because now he knew one thing for sure. Someone inside this room wanted him to fail. And the only reason he knew was because a waitress had decided not to stay silent. The meeting ended without a signature, but the tension did not end with it. By the next morning, rumors had already started spreading through the business world. Investors were confused. Some were angry. News reporters waited outside Daniel Hayes' office, asking why the deal had suddenly stopped. Inside the company, pressure grew fast. Daniel sat alone in his office, staring at the contract again. The words looked normal, clean, legal. But now he could not ignore the feeling that something was hidden between the lines. Across the city, Maya's night had been much worse. Her manager called her into the office as soon as her shift ended. Someone from the meeting had complained. She was told she had crossed professional boundaries. The hotel could lose important clients because of her actions. Maya tried to explain, but it didn't matter. She was suspended without pay. Walking home that morning, She felt fear settle deep in her chest. She had done what she believed was right, but now reality was catching up with her. Bills did not stop because someone told the truth. At home, her young son slept peacefully on the couch. Maya watched him for a moment, wondering if she had made a terrible mistake. Meanwhile, Daniel began asking quiet questions inside his company. He did not accuse anyone directly. Instead, he requested financial reports again, old emails, internal reviews, small details that most executives ignored. At first, everything seemed normal, but the deeper he looked, the more strange things appeared. Numbers adjusted at the last minute. Reports approved too quickly. When they finally met again, it was not in a luxury office or a hotel. It was in a small coffee shop near a neighborhood. Maya looked nervous sitting across from him. She expected anger or blame. Instead, Daniel asked a simple question. Why did you risk everything for someone you don't even know? Maya looked down at her coffee before answering. Because someone should have done it for my family. The honesty in her voice surprised him. For the first time, Daniel saw the situation clearly. This was not just about business anymore. It was about people, the workers, the families, the lives connected to the deal. And someone inside his company was willing to destroy all of that for power. As Daniel left the cafe, his phone rang. It was one of his internal auditors. The man sounded nervous. Mr. Hayes, you need to see this. The financial projections were changed last week. Authorized under Victor's approval. Daniel stopped walking. The truth was getting closer. And now, there was no turning back. Daniel did not sleep that night. The documents from the internal audit stayed open on his screen for hours. Numbers had been adjusted carefully. Not enough to look illegal, but enough to change the outcome of the deal. Losses were hidden. Future risks were moved into small sections most people never read. It was smart. Too smart. Only someone inside the company could have done it. And every trail slowly pointed toward Victor Lang. Daniel leaned back in his chair, thinking carefully. Accusing Victor without proof would destroy the company. Investors would panic. The deal would collapse, and thousands of employees could lose their jobs overnight. He needed certainty. The next morning, Daniel called for another meeting with the investors. Officially, it was to finalize remaining concerns. Unofficially, it was something else. A test. Meanwhile, Maya's situation was getting worse. Her suspension became permanent. The hotel did not want trouble connected to its name. She packed her locker quietly, while other workers avoided eye contact. Some felt sorry for her, but no one spoke. Outside, she checked her phone. A message from an unknown number appeared. Stay away from the deal. This is your last warning. Her stomach tightened. Fear returned, stronger than before. She wondered if helping Daniel had put her family in danger. Just as she started walking away, another message appeared, this time from Daniel's assistant. Mr. Hayes would like you present at today's meeting. Maya stared at the screen in disbelief. Why would he want her there again? Back at the Grand Aurora Hotel, the meeting room looked exactly the same as before. Same table, same people, same expensive smiles. But this time, the mood felt different. Tense. Victor greeted Daniel warmly, as if nothing had changed. Ready to finish this today? He asked with a confident smile. Daniel returned the smile calmly. Yes, today we finish it. When Maya entered the room a few minutes later, several investors looked annoyed again. Whispers filled the air. Some clearly believed she had no right to be there. Daniel ignored them. The documents were placed in front of him once more. Before we sign, Daniel said, I want to review one final detail. Victor's expression did not change, but his fingers tightened slightly on the table. Daniel began asking questions, simple ones at first, about projections, ownership timelines, risk control. Victor answered smoothly, like always. Too smoothly. Then Daniel asked about the financial revisions made the previous week. For the first time, Victor hesitated. It was a minor adjustment, he said quickly. Standard procedure. Daniel nodded slowly. Strange. Because my auditors say those adjustments transfer operational control away from my company after the first review. The room grew quiet. Several investors looked confused now, flipping through their copies of the contract. Victor's smile faded just a little. Daniel, This isn't the place for internal discussions. But Daniel continued calmly. I agree, he said, which is why I already shared the documents with external investigators this morning. The words landed heavily. Victor's face lost color. At that exact moment, the meeting room doors opened. 2 investigators stepped inside, followed by hotel security. Conversations stopped instantly. What is this? One investor demanded. Daniel stood up slowly. This, he said, is the moment we find out who tried to steal control of this company. Maya watched from the side of the room, her heart racing. She had never imagined things would go this far. Victor stood up suddenly. This is insane. You're destroying your own deal. Daniel met his eyes calmly. No, I'm saving it. One of the investigators placed documents on the table, emails, approval records, financial edits. Proof that changes had been made without full disclosure. The trap had closed. Victor looked around the room, realizing there was no easy escape. The same people who trusted him hours ago now looked at him with suspicion. Silence filled the space again. Maya realized something in that moment. Power did not disappear when truth appeared. It fought back first. And this fight was not over yet, because as Victor slowly sat down, his expression changed from shock to anger. And angry people with power were the most dangerous of all. The room felt smaller after the investigators arrived. No one spoke for several seconds. The confident energy that once filled the meeting had disappeared, replaced by quiet tension. Investors looked at one another, unsure of what to say or who to trust anymore. Victor Lang sat still, his jaw tight. The calm businessman image he always carried was gone. In its place was something colder. This proves nothing, Victor said finally. His voice was controlled, but anger hid underneath. Business decisions get adjusted all the time. One of the investigators opened a folder and slid several printed emails across the table. These adjustments were made after internal approval deadlines, he said calmly. And the financial risk was intentionally hidden. The words hit hard. Murmurs spread around the room. Some investors leaned forward, reading quickly. Others looked at Daniel with new respect, realizing how close they had come to signing something dangerous. Maya stood quietly near the wall, watching everything unfold. She fell out of place again, like she did not belong in a room filled with powerful people making life-changing decisions. But this time, no one ignored her. Several people glanced in her direction, now understanding why the meeting had stopped days earlier. Victor suddenly stood up. You think this ends well for you? He said, looking directly at Daniel. You just destroyed a billion-dollar opportunity. Daniel remained calm. No, you tried to. The investigators asked Victor to remain seated while they continued reviewing documents. His lawyer quickly stepped in, whispering urgently to him. The confidence Victor once had was slipping away. One investor shook his head slowly. If this had gone through, we would all have been involved. Another added quietly, we trusted you. The realization spread through the room. The deal had not just been risky for Daniel. It could have ruined everyone involved. For the first time, the power balance changed. Victor was no longer the strongest person in the room. Minutes later, the investigators escorted him outside for questioning. The door closed behind them, leaving a heavy silence. No aplausos, no celebración, just relief. Daniel exhaled slowly, as if a weight had finally lifted from his shoulders. He looked around the room at the investors who had pressured him to sign only hours before. The deal is canceled, he said simply. No one argued. One by one, people gathered their papers and left quietly. The meeting that was supposed to make headlines ended without cameras, without announcements. Only truth remained. As the room emptied, Daniel turned toward Maya. He wanted to thank her, to say something meaningful. Without her, none of this would have been uncovered in time. But Maya was already walking toward the door. She did not wait for praise. She did not look proud. She looked tired. Daniel caught up with her in the hallway. You saved my company, he said. Maya shook her head gently. I just said what I heard. You risked everything. She gave a small, sad smile. Sometimes staying quiet costs more. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The noise of the hotel continued around them. Normal life moving forward as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Daniel realized something then. Maya did not see herself as a hero. She saw herself as someone who simply refused to look away. Before he could say more, she thanked him politely and walked toward the exit. Daniel watched her leave, feeling that the story was not finished yet, because something about this situation still felt incomplete. Later that evening, while reviewing the final reports, Daniel learned something unexpected. The investigation revealed that Victor had been planning this move for months. The deal was only the final step. If it had succeeded, Daniel would have lost control of his own company within a year. He leaned back in his chair, thinking about how close he had come to losing everything, and how the warning came from the one person nobody had listened to. Across the city, Maya returned home to her small apartment. She opened the door quietly, not wanting to wake her son. Life looked the same as before: unpaid bills, a small kitchen, tired walls. Except now, she no longer had a job. She sat down in silence, wondering what came next. She had done the right thing, but sometimes doing the right thing came with a price. And neither of them knew yet that the biggest change was still coming. The days after the investigation felt strangely quiet. News about the failed deal spread quickly through business circles, but the public never learned the full story. Official statements called it a strategic withdrawal. No one mentioned the waitress who had stopped everything before it was too late. Daniel, however, could not stop thinking about her. He returned to work, but things felt different now. Meetings sounded emptier. Conversations felt less honest. For years, he believed success came from intelligence and control. Now he realized how close he had come to losing everything simply because he trusted the wrong people, and because he almost ignored the right one. He asked his assistant to find Maya again, but she was not easy to locate. She no longer worked at the hotel. No forwarding address. No new employment records. It took days before someone finally mentioned a small neighborhood diner where she sometimes helped during busy hours. Daniel went there himself. The diner was nothing like the places he was used to. No glass walls. No expensive furniture. Just simple tables, the smell of coffee, and quiet conversations between tired people finishing long days. Maya stood behind the counter, writing an order. When she looked up and saw Daniel, surprise crossed her face. "You didn't have to come here," she said softly. Daniel smiled slightly. "I think I did." She finished serving a customer before sitting across from him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence felt different from the tension of the meeting room. Calm, honest. "I heard about your job," Daniel said carefully. Maya shrugged. "It's okay. I knew that might happen. But you still did it." She looked down at her hands, thinking. For the first time, she seemed unsure of what to say. Daniel waited. Finally, she spoke. "When I was younger, my father worked for a construction company," she said quietly. "They promised him security, a long-term contract, good future." Her voice remained calm, but her eyes told a different story. One day, the company changed the agreement. Small words in the contract. Things he didn't understand. He lost everything in months. Our house, his savings, his health after that. Daniel listened without interrupting. "No one warned him," Maya continued. "People knew something was wrong. They just didn't want trouble." She looked up at him then. "When I heard those men talking about your deal, it sounded the same. Same confidence. Same plan. I couldn't pretend I didn't hear it." Daniel felt the weight of her words. For her, this was never about business or money. It was about stopping history from repeating itself. "You didn't do it for me," he said quietly. Maya shook her head. "No, I did it so someone else wouldn't lose everything like we did." The honesty in her answer stayed with him. For the first time in years, Daniel felt embarrassed by how simple the truth was. He had spent his life protecting numbers and assets, while Maya had protected people. Outside the diner window, evening lights turned on across the street. Normal life continued, unaware of the conversation happening inside. Daniel leaned forward slightly. "You know," he said, "most people in that room had more power than you." Maya smiled faintly. "Power doesn't help if you're afraid to use your voice." Her words stayed in the air. Daniel realized that the company he built needed more than smart investors and aggressive partners. It needed people who were willing to speak when something felt wrong. People like her. As he stood to leave, Maya expected the conversation to end there. Maybe a thank you. Maybe nothing more. Instead, Daniel paused. "I'm holding a press conference tomorrow," he said. "And this time, I'm telling the truth." Maya's expression changed. "You don't have to do that." "Yes," Daniel replied calmly. "I do." Because he understood something now. The story was never about a billionaire saving his company. It was about a woman who refused to stay silent and changed everything because of it. And tomorrow, the world was finally going to hear her name. The next morning, cameras filled the front of Daniel Hayes' company headquarters. Reporters stood shoulder to shoulder, waiting. News channels expected a normal business announcement. Maybe a new deal, maybe damage control after the canceled agreement. No one expected anything unusual. Inside the building, Daniel stood behind the stage curtain, adjusting his tie. He had spoken at hundreds of conferences before, but this time felt different. This time, it wasn't about profit. It was about truth. Across the city, Maya watched the live broadcast from the small television inside the diner. She had not planned to watch, but the owner turned it on when the news alert appeared. Daniel stepped onto the stage. Flashing cameras lit up the room. The noise slowly faded as he began to speak. "A few weeks ago," he said calmly, "my company nearly signed a deal that would have caused serious harm. Not just to our business, but to thousands of workers and families connected to it." The reporters leaned forward. This was not the statement they expected. Daniel continued, his voice steady. "The deal was stopped because someone spoke up. Someone who had no power in that room. Someone most people ignored." Maya's hands froze around her coffee cup. Back at the conference, Daniel paused for a moment before saying her name. "Maya Carter." The room filled with whispers. Reporters quickly checked their notes, confused. Who was she? Daniel explained everything. How a waitress overheard a conversation, how she risked her job to warn him, and how her courage forced him to look closer at the truth. "She didn't do it for money," Daniel said. "She did it because she believed staying silent would hurt people." In the diner, customers slowly turned toward Maya. Some recognized her from the screen. She looked uncomfortable, almost wishing she could disappear. But Daniel wasn't finished. "For years," he continued, "I believed success meant surrounding myself with powerful voices. I was wrong. The most important voice was the one nobody listened to." The room fell silent. "This company will move forward differently," Daniel said. "From today, we are creating an ethics and transparency division, and the person leading it is Maya Carter." The announcement shocked everyone. Reporters began shouting questions at once. Cameras flashed brighter. Social media exploded with reactions within minutes. Inside the diner, Maya stared at the screen, completely stunned. She had never asked for recognition, never expected her life to change like this. Later that afternoon, Daniel visited the diner again. This time, people recognized him immediately, but he ignored the attention and walked straight to Maya. "You didn't have to do that," she said quietly. "Yes," Daniel replied gently. "I did." Maya hesitated. "I don't belong in your world." Daniel shook his head. "That's exactly why you do." He explained that the role wasn't about business experience. It was about perspective, about having someone willing to ask hard questions when others stayed quiet. Maya thought about her father, about the contract that changed their lives, about the moment she almost stayed silent in that meeting room. Her life had always been about surviving. Maybe now it could be about changing things. Outside, the city moved as usual. Cars passed. People rushed to work. Most would never know how close one decision came to hurting so many lives. But inside that small diner, something important shifted. Maya finally nodded. Not because of the title, not because of the money, but because she understood that sometimes one voice could stop a powerful mistake, if it was brave enough to speak. Weeks later, when people told the story, they didn't talk about the billion-dollar deal that failed. They talked about the waitress who told the truth. And the lesson stayed simple, just like Maya herself. Sometimes the smallest voice in the room is the one that saves everyone.